Hi there! Welcome back to Ceevaluations. I'm so glad you took time out of your day to be here with me. Today, we are finally concluding our breakdown and review of Fine Boys by Eghose Imasuen, a coming-of-age story following 18-year-old Ewan navigating the dangers of autism in the late 90s at the University of Benin. Now, in the last video, chaos had befallen the university, leading to a shutdown and forceful removal of all students, as in removal from campus and removal from life. But yeah, now we are entering what's supposed to be year 3. So let us see what other crazy situations await our boys this year. Now, before we start, I do want to put out a disclaimer that again, this is not a spoiler-free review. If it were, trust me, this video would be a lot shorter. We're going to be diving into key plot points and character arcs. So if you're yet to read the book and you'd like to go in blind, you can save this video for later and come back to it. This ending contains scenes of gore, assaults, kidnapping, and other graphic details, so viewer discretion is advised. And so with all that sorted, let us conclude year 3, March 1995 to eternity in Fine Boys. Now, in chapter 22, we see that Ewan and his dad had to navigate the young men in the area that wanted to work. You see, the Scallop Oil Pipeline had a refinery in Warri that they mobilized in late July in the outskirts of Sapele, and his father had started work there, employing the boys in the area. But because Ewan's father refused to pay their extortion fees, the men became very aggressive. His dad felt like he knew how to deal with these touts, but the local contracting community was starting to demand outrageous fees due to the arrest of Ken Sarawiwa, giving the people a cause to celebrate. There were 12 indigents under Ewan's supervision that were always late, not disciplined, not willing to work, and they would steal boots, cutlery, helmets, and overalls from the site. Him, his father, and Osaze were in the trailer that Monday having a board meeting because last week Friday, his father had, instead of paying the men and letting them continue working, pay them off and fire them, telling them not to bother coming back. One of the ringleaders, Stephen, tried to get aggressive, but Ewan's dad punched him in the face and the guy fainted, so the rest just left. Ewan felt his dad should have paid them though, because it would have just been a fraction of their profits, but he refused, resulting in the men coming to the site last night with weapons, threatening to kidnap Ewan and set their camp on fire, taking the field manager and storekeeper Anthony instead. His father told the driver Michael to drive to Sapele and get the Moko division to the chief's palace and meet him there, and his show of strength worked. The men released their workers, making them sign an undertaking to ensure that it wouldn't harm them again. The boys resumed work the next day, his father trying his best to ignore their attitude and pay them well. He even ended up making Stephen his right-hand man, realizing that at the end of the day, they're just young, angry men in a failing country. Ewan finished his contract with his father and resumed school in early September 1995. The twins were supposed to have resumed September last year, and he was supposed to be finishing year 3 by now, but due to all the riots, they had lost a full year, all because students had dared to oppose tyrannical rule. Even the former attorney of the pro-democratic coalition had started blasting his former comrades and began serving the junta instead, calling for their arrest. Ewan thought to himself, why was it so hard for Nigerians to get the concept of democracy right? The people who were supposed to protect were shooting and assaulting the next generation of leaders. William asked him what the difference is between them and the boys, because remember, they also participated in the loot, but Ewan just felt Willie was angry he didn't get to partake in it. Besides, Ochuku had swindled them of their loot anyways, claiming that the Mopo confiscated it, but then Ejiro found out that was a lie, and it led to a confrontation between Ewan and Ochuko, and then Efe and Keo got involved and it turned into this huge thing. So Ewan decided, you know what, I'm moving out. I can't deal with this passive aggressiveness. He was going to move into a 4-bedroom that was next to Ochuko's house with Mesiri Barlow, his classmate who had helped him find Amide last year during the hostel raid. Mesiri was already in Benin negotiating with the landlord, so it was decided Ewan, Mesiri, Willem, Toyo, and Tambo would share the flat, and no one would disturb them because they had an AK boy and 2 Cosa Nostra boys for protection, so no one would step on their toes. But it is important to note that 2 days after the riots, Tambo had come to Ewan telling him that he had to leave campus because Tommy, in their most recent calls meeting, was still insisting on making Ewan blend. He even had to go and stay at Uncle Max's during the time to escape the trouble. William made sure to tell Ewan to caution his brother Osaze about not blending into any confras when he resumed. Same thing with NEA, as some girls were also forming cults in Unilag. They then visited Brenda at her flat, which was the BQ of her father's mansion. Ewan asked her why her father doesn't just rent it out, but she tells him that it holds special memories of their parents' wedding and her siblings' birth and and helps remind her father of where he's been and where he's going, which in turn makes Ewan think about where he's coming from and where he himself is heading to. Chapter 23 starts with Ewan witnessing his mom and dad arguing again the week before he and Osaze were to resume about where Osaze would be living. His dad wanted him to stay on campus, but Osaze was renting a flat with Edosa, Uncle Max's son, in Iwerioba Estate, right next to Harry's actually. His dad was complaining about the cost of their education, which made his mom flare up and started throwing insults at each other, triggering the fight. Ewan had had enough of being the one to separate them. He could hear the commotion of the fight from his room and he could see their respective shadows, Enie and Osaze leaving the horrible scene to their own room. But not long after the argument ended, his father was screaming again, this time at Enie because she tried to end her life. He saw her with a pack of ampiclox and immediately assumed the worst. For me, this chapter gave insight on his father and why he acts the way he does. His father gets very emotional and opens up to his children about why he's so hard on them, how hard his early life was, and how he had to fight for everything that he has today. His grandmother threw his mother and Uncle Max out before he was even born, and after Uncle Max went abroad and his mother remarried, he lived with relatives who couldn't care less if he lived or died. He fought for his life and all he wants is to provide for his kids what was not available for him. Anyways, his parents ultimately made up, and there's also this cute and funny story that his mother tells in the car on the way to drop Ewan and Osaze. She again warns Osaze, like she did Ewan, about girls and bad company and staying close to God. She started getting emotional, telling them how much she loves her boys and how their father is a good man, but to not grow up thinking it's okay to hit their wives like he does. Ewan realized that the love that his parents had for each other was like his love for cigarettes. He knew they were bad for him, but he needed to indulge anyways. They finally get to the flat in chapter 24 with Willem and Masiri already there and Tambo to arrive later in the evening. His mom spent some time talking with Willem, then prayed for the boys and anointed the flat, claiming that no evil will befall her son here, before giving him a new Bible and prayer book, smearing his forehead with anointing oil and going to drop off Osaze at his estate. They met Harry and his mother there. Then Ewan went to his old place to get some stuff he left behind last year, where he saw Ife and his new flatmate Charming with like an apostrophe. He and Ife were still cool, you know, there was no bad blood. It's just that they couldn't live together anymore. And I feel like that's fine. You know, some friendships work better when you're not around them 24/7. So the new flat consisted of Ewan, Willem, Masiri, Toyo, and Tambo, who came in that evening from Port Harcourt. They decided to go to Joe's to meet Osaze and Edosa for dinner. Willem left them halfway to go to his girlfriend's flat instead for free food, even though she was in Lagos. But because he had her key, he decided to just go. They got to the beer parlor, Tambo going to sit at the Cosa Nostra table with Tommy, Frank, and Frank's girlfriend. Edosa wondered how they could talk so openly about the Confra boys, but Ewan explained to him that everyone already knew their place. Ibril was also there, on a table not too far from the Cosa Nostras, giving them a very mischievous smile. Only God knows what he's done this time, especially now that Willem and Ibril weren't on good terms due to the robbery at Harry's. It was even weirder when Tommy sent a round of drinks to their table before coming up and introducing himself to Ewan's brother, telling him that he hopes he's not a fake guy like his brother. As they finished eating and were about to leave, someone suddenly rushed in to deliver the news that they had killed the chief. Who is the chief? Well, the chief is Wayne, Willie's girlfriend's uncle, a wealthy and powerful Isekiri chief who was one of the patrons of the Democratic Coalition, making headlines for his threats of a civil disobedience campaign if the junta went through with the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa. Wayne always said that her aunt, his wife, would always complain about how open he is to his community, letting anyone have access to their mansion in Lagos. And the chief would always say that, you know, she married a man of the people, and so the people were his mistresses, and he couldn't shut them out. But now those same people had murdered him, shooting him dead in his bed on Sunday morning. Willem hadn't been able to reach her, and though they had no idea how he must be feeling, they tried their best to be with him during this difficult time, sleeping with candles still burning, their small makeshift vigil for the fallen Democrats. Now, in chapter 25, we see that it took a week before a mutual friend brought a handwritten note to Willem from Wayne, telling him she was fine. The chief's family had been bundled into a room downstairs while the assassins, led by a man who spoke perfect Itsekiri, went to her uncle's bedroom and shot him once in the head and once in the chest. They were locked in that room for more than 2 hours before another visitor heard their cries. When they got to the police station, the officers were pressuring them to identify a suspect, but Wayne knew that none of the men that they brought were the ones that killed her uncle. And it wasn't until her cousin, the chief's first son, almost parried for them that they finally got to leave. Willem's mood got a bit better now, no more sulking. And by November, they had furnished the flat a bit more, adding some new curtains, furnishing the kitchen a little bit. Amide would come to cook for them from time to time. They he installed Awine's Nintendo and Willem's VCR. So, not too bad for a group of young men just trying to get by. Oluchi and Fra had started dating, and Thriller, their cadaver, was down to just his torso and head. Ewine decided to start taking school seriously again, borrowing notes from Amide to read and copy. He's not a hard reader, though. He prefers to read free, turning himself into a kufri, a half-baked nerd, some might say. Most evenings, he would remain indoors reading while the rest went to Joe's. Most mornings, he'd try his best to go for classes. He would spend more time with Masiri playing football together, but saw less of Ejiro, feeling like he was making new friends and discarding the old ones. He'd also spend time at Amide's BQ, which belonged to a friend of her father, a physiology lecturer, who was very strict about visitors, especially male ones. Whenever he would go to visit Brenda, she would always say how she didn't think Ewan actually loved or even liked Amide, feeling like the event from last year worked more like a trauma bond for both of them rather than it being an emotional relationship. He didn't have that passion or zeal like he did with Seye. And honestly, Ewan agrees. He doesn't think that he would ever fall as deep for anyone as he did with Seye, but regardless, he still liked how he felt around Amide, and plus she smelled really nice. Brenda then drops a bomb on Ewan as he's about to leave her place, saying that she's seeing someone. And when Ewan asks who, he's shocked to find out that it's Laurenchi, of all people. Like, is Brenda okay? Why on earth would she be involving herself with a comfort boy? Oh, also in this chapter, they talk about the rise of Yahoo boys and how instead of old men coming to pick up the campus girls, it was young men in flashy cars bought with illegal money stolen from the Oibos, which they like to call reparations for robbing their continent dry for centuries. We also see a scene where one day as Ewan and Tambo are in his room getting ready for bed, he asks Ewan when was the last time he spoke to his brother. Ewan answers that he did yesterday and asks him why, and Tambo reveals that Tommy had come up to Osaze 3 days ago to try and make him blend and told him to keep an eye on his brother. He tells Ewan that there's going to be a war soon between the Cosa Nostra and the Black Hat boys, and it's been brewing for a while, honestly since 100 level. And apparently that night that they were at Joe's and Jibril was sitting not too far from them, guess whose clothes he was wearing? Frank's. Apparently, Frank's flat was robbed 2 weeks before resumption. They took his clothes, his deck, his TV, and almost everything. But the Cosa Nostra decided to keep it hush because it wouldn't be a good look on their done. But that night, when they saw Jibril wearing Frank's clothes, Tommy almost popped him right then and there. See, if TJ were still leading, all this could have been resolved over a few rounds of drinks, but Frank's leadership style was too mafia-esque. He thinks he's in a gangster film. Tambo warns Ewan that a war is coming and somebody might die because Frank has ordered out a hit on Jibril. He asks Ewan if he has spoken to Willem recently, but Ewan doesn't even think the AK boys know about Jibril's thievery. Ewan says he'll talk to his brother, and Tambo says he will talk to Willem. Ken Tariwa was executed that November. Him and his men hanged, bathed in sulfuric acid, and buried in secret, unmarked graves, causing an uproar in the international community. Nigeria was removed from the Commonwealth, and generals and their families were being handed out travel bans. Rumors of American invasion, all this, caused the entire Democratic coalition to be gunned down and cast into oblivion. Nigerians were silent, bus drivers silent, radio volumes reduced, the junta throwing whoever they felt was a protester or a liability straight to jail. Now, I can't lie, chapter 26 really disappointed me, not because it was bad, but because of what Tambo did in this chapter. I remember in year one when room A109 had gotten robbed and I suspected Tambo had something to do with it, but he denied it and the boys forgave him and moved on, and I said it was a bad idea. Yeah. But before I start with Tambo, Ewan had actually spoken to Osaze, his brother, about his run-in with Tommy, and Osaze had assured him that he knew not to accept Tommy's invitation to blend and would steer clear of him from now on. Anyways, yeah, Mesiri's money had been stolen. How? Well, the group had organized a small party to celebrate Wayimi's return to school the first week of December. There were a lot of guests that night. Preppa, Bra, Ejiro, two distant cousins of Willem, Peter and Paul, who were twins, Ewan, Tambo, and Mesiri, with Amide and Wayemi. But the next morning, Mesiri found the black polythene bag where he stashed his money, not on top of his wardrobe where he usually keeps it. They searched everywhere. Tambo was even being the most energetic about searching. Toyo then suggested that Tambo take them to the Babalao from 100 level when their room was robbed. And so the gang, Toyo, Tambo, Ewan, Willem, and Mesiri bid Fra, Preppa, and the twins goodbye. Ewan tells Ejiro to keep an eye on them before they journey to First East Circular Road to meet the Babalao. Now, Tambo confided in Ewan that he thought the twins must be the culprits and the Babalao would confirm it. Ewan was skeptical, even more so when he saw the signboard stating Dr. Spirit and Law, the White Wizards. As soon as they got there, Tambo goes to the Juju man and whispers in his ear. And Ewan thinks, oh, he was just informing him of the situation, which we come to find out later was not the case. He was actually telling him to find a way to cover for him and frame the twins for the stolen money, giving him vital information like his real name being Clement and the owner of the money being Mesiri and the boys being twins. So it would seem like, oh, he already spiritually knew what was happening. Mind you, Ewan paid for this juju thing out of his own pocket, even though he was most skeptical about it. Although his plan worked and the juju man concluded that it was indeed the twins, Toyo and Willem were still not convinced and insisted that this wasn't the same juju man they went to in 100 level. So they go to Second East Circular Road to find actual Babalao, Mr. Okoronko, a middle-aged accounting clerk in Uniben Bursary who did part-time juju work. Honestly, I didn't know that you could do part-time juju work. That's crazy. His wife greeted them and turns out Tambo is a family friend to them. Mr. Okoronko finally arrives and does his own ritual, scattering a bunch of leaves and getting Mesiri, the owner of the money, to pull on them as hard as he can. If he pulled, asked the oracle, and called the person's name and it broke and the idol in the middle fell, then that person was the culprit. He tried it for everyone. Toyo, Willem, Ejiro, the girls, the twins, Ewan. He pulled as hard as he could, didn't budge, until he reached Tambo, where ultimately the leaves fell apart and the gods opened Tambo's yash to everybody. Honestly, Ewan already knew. Hell, I feel like they all knew deep down. Tambo got an earful from the accountant slash Babalao, and the gang asked him why he couldn't just ask them to borrow his money. He apologized to his friends, saying that he had a debt to Cosa Nostra to pay, and he even planned on returning it without anyone noticing. So it would be like, oh, Mesiri just misplaced it. But the damage had already been done. And as they silently rode back to the flats, Mesiri quietly informed Ewan that Tambo, he had to go. Couldn't forgive him. He couldn't be trusted, and he doesn't care how much insider knowledge they get about Cosa Nostra from him. He was a liability, and Ewan, in his heart of heart, knew it too. Chapter 27. There was this restaurant at Adolo Junction called M&G, and they started frequenting it during the holidays when Joe's was closed. Ewan was actually glad about staying in school over the holidays, preferring it to being home because now that his parents had stopped fighting each other, they instead ganged up together to fight their children. He felt for some odd reason that it was much more peaceful at home when his mom and dad fought. Mesiri, who had been quiet over the holidays, still reeling from Tambo's betrayal, had blossomed into a talkative roommate who loved playing psychiatrist, pressing Ewan and Willem about their relationships and what they could do to improve as boyfriends, which annoyed Willie a lot. He and Amide had also been spending more time together. Now, from their interactions, I think I agree with Brenda. I don't think Ewan really likes Amide. I think he feels comfortable around her and they have good times together, but I don't think it's love. I don't think it's the same type of love that he had for Shay, but he still does care for her. She even pressed him about it one time, asking him one day why they never seem to fight or quarrel. And I think it's because Ewan isn't as emotionally invested in the relationship to that point. Christmas morning comes, he and Willem wait for Mesiri to come back from service before having breakfast and heading to the phone booth to call home before they go to Uncle Max's for Christmas lunch. They did the exact same thing on New Year's Day too. The school break helped quench the fire that had been brewing on campus between the confras after the whole issue in Jowett with Frank and Yibril. In early December, while Yibril was on his way to night class, he was ambushed by a group of guys who stabbed him in the buttocks. Willie told Ewan that the AK boys knew exactly who ordered the hit, and the confra was actually happy about what happened to Yibril, feeling like he was getting away with too much bad behavior. Tension still brewed though. Cars stopped taking passengers after 9 p.m. Girls' hostel and the car park were quiet. School authorities were warning against any breach of peace on campus, but he hopes that the 2 weeks at home had cooled down most of the hothead. Brenda was one of the first students to return. Joanne was with Toyo and Ejiro as MRG for drinks, but decided to go visit her at her flat where he met her and Laurenchi. They drank and they just said about the Yibril hits and how his stay at UBTH should keep him out of trouble for the time being. Messina and Amade met up with them before they all decided to head back to M&G for more drinks. Here we find out something very peculiar about William. So supposedly he has a very rude and nasty character to service workers. He berates them for even the slightest mistake. Even though because he's, Oibo, they give him the best service, he still berates them a lot. He says it's because he hates oppression, but Ewan and the gang can clearly see that he just does it way too much. William and Waimi joined them later and he asked Ewan when Tambo would be resuming. Ewan answering that Tambo probably is already with Frank at Eghose Imasuen. Ejiro tried bringing up the whole Tambo incident from last year, but Willie gives him a look to not talk about it in front of Laurenchi. Brenda, who is now tipsy from drinking, invited the group to Phoebe, Harry's sister's birthday party at Eghose Imasuen. Ekosodin. Why would Harry's sister move from Osasogi to Ekosodin? Ewan obviously doesn't want to go. One, because his second MBs are like a month away. But also, the guy still has PTSD from the last time he attended a party at Ekosodin. That night, Amide is in his room asking if he or Willie are going to the party, but he says no. Plus, Willie was supposed to travel to Abraka, where Amide's little brother stays, and he knows that there is a war brewing between three confraternities there. His mother even had to pull him off campus because of the rising tensions. Ewan doesn't want to believe that Willie is going there to also participate, but as much as he tries to gaslight himself, he knows that Willie was one to do something like this. He always tries to do too much. He always gets in over his head, and he would never pass up a chance to also get in on that action. Chapter 28 is a sad one. 2 days till eternity from Ewan's POV, and there's really no other way to describe those 2 days than with one word: chaos. You see, Amide had left for her flat the next morning, Ewan promising to meet her in class later that day. By this point, he knew that she loved him and he loved her, but they were too scared to voice any of that out loud just yet. He enters the living room, seeing Mesiri getting ready for class and Waimi in the kitchen making breakfast. Willie, coming out of his room, already packed to head to Abraka. William tells Ewan that he knows he's probably wondering why he's even going to Abraka in the first place, but it's because their Don had ordered some AKs to head there for negotiations between a Mafiite boy called Lopez and some Cosa Nostra boys in the area. Ewan asked him when he started carrying this confrat thing on his head. Didn't he say he only joined to protect himself? Plus, it was a well-known fact that the only reason a confrat boy would travel were for targeted hits. But Willie tells him not to worry and that he'll be fine and back before he knows it. They bid each other goodbye and Willem leaves. Not too long after, Tambo comes in carrying his own travel bag containing tickets for Phoebe's party from Frank himself for Ewan, Toyo, Mesiri, and Willem. Ewan is annoyed that Tambo is trying to pressure them to go to a party that they all know is just another disguised initiation plan in Ekosodin. The next day after lectures, Ewan headed to C6 to see Oluchi, Prepper, and Fra, where Prepper, who had heard some gist from his neighbors in town about the chaos in Abraka, was retelling the story of how some AK boys had shot the Lopez guy dead last night. But didn't really say that they were going to make peace. That evening, Tambo gets ready for the party, borrowing socks from Mesiri and Ewan's watch before leaving around 7 p.m. The two boys plus Toyo then begin considering the effects of the Lopez guy's killing at the peace meeting and why Brenda is inviting people to confra parties. They're all suspicious that William was involved in the hit. He never knew when to end things, always going too far, always pushing too much. Toyo is uncomfortable with Brenda's closeness to Laurenti and tries to explain to them that, listen, they survived 3 years here without any conflict issues, but now somehow they ended up living with them and becoming friends with them. Something Ewan didn't know that he would keep dwelling on so many years later. Toyo tells Ewan that he needs to speak to Brenda, and Ewan agrees to do so soon before they all retreat to their rooms for the night. That night, Ewan had a dream. He was in the bush surrounded by dark figures, their faces different confra boys, Tommy, TJ, Frank, all gloating that they had finally caught him and he must blend tonight. The face then morphed into Willem's and walked towards Ewan, holding a piece of firewood, and using it, he hit Ewan in the skull over and over until he woke up to the sound of knocking at the front door. It was Willem at like 5 a.m. telling him to come open the door protector from the inside. He opens it with sleepy eyes. Willie walks in and Ewan goes right back to sleep. He wakes up again later to find Mesiri, Toyo, and Tambo in the living room, with Tambo looking absolutely haggard. His jeans and his shirts were torn. He only had one shoe, and his other leg, which had no shoe and was just a sock, was covered in mud. He tells them that Wahala Day School, some of the AK boys had attacked Phoebe's party, led by Yibril, with guns, robbing everyone of their phones and valuables, even Ewan's wristwatch that he borrowed him. Yibril put a gun to Frank's head, threatening to end him right there. But Frank, showing off his, Capone skills, takes the gun from him, shouting at everyone to run, giving a chance for him, Brenda, Phoebe, Harry, Tommy, Laurenti, and Tambo to escape. Now, Ewan is confused because Willie told him that the Black Axe wouldn't retaliate for Yibril, but Tommy says that no, those were definitely AK boys. They even had to wait in the bush till morning, and Tambo escorted Brenda home before coming back to the flat this morning. Campbell then drops the bomb that Frank stepped down last week. The new dawn of the Cosa Nostra is now Tommy, and Tommy's number one order, effective immediately, is a hit on any AK boy found in Osasogi tonight. Since Cosa Nostras couldn't feel safe in Ekosodin, the Black Axes wouldn't feel safe in Osasogi. Now, that's very bad for our crew because Willem is a Black Axe member and they live right next to Osasogi Gates. See where I'm going with this? Campbell came to warn Willem, but he had already left with Wayne. The whole day, Wayne couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad would happen. Even Amide could tell that he was distracted. He tried looking for Willie the whole day, but he was nowhere to be found. He stopped by Jowitz to catch up with his brother Osaze and Edosa, telling them about everything going on and how they should stay on high alert. By the time he got home at 6:30, he found Willem in the living room with Wayne, too furious at his stubbornness and stupidity for even coming back knowing that he had a target on his back. Ewan just stormed into his room, Toyo following suit with his radio. Willem kept stalling. He kept stalling. By 7:30, he said, oh no, he's just trying to fix his torch. He will leave soon. 8:15, he says he needs to take a shower first, and then he'll leave. 8:45, oh, Wayne also wants to shower, but once she's done, then we'll both leave. They heard the screaming at exactly 9 on the dot. Willem was outside getting attacked. Chapter 29. Ewan and Toyo rush out of the room, whispering frantically to turn off the lights when Waini tells them that the assailants are still outside. She was in the shower when she heard voices outside the window, triggering her PTSD from the night that her uncle was murdered. She was naked, so she ran to Willem and he went out to confront them. Then they heard it, another scream, and then painful moaning. Willem staggers back into the house, a Hausa dagger sticking out of his bag. And in case you don't know what a Hausa dagger is, I'm just going to put a picture of it right here so you guys know what we're dealing with. He collapses at Ewan's feet, screaming for help. Ewan frantically orders Wayne to get help. She runs into the road in just her t-shirts, looking for any police officer she can find. The boys don't know what to do. Even Ewan, the medical student, doesn't know what to do. And in their panic, they make the stupidest decision. They make a decision that ultimately dooms Willem's life. They take the dagger out of Willem's back. Wayne returns with a police officer and they all enter a Good Samaritan's pickup and head straight to the teaching hospital. They get to the entrance of the ER within minutes, everyone except Ewan jumping out, and a nurse flags a surgeon who comes to the car, sees Willem in Ewan's lap, checks Willem's pulse, checks his eyes, turns to Ewan, and just from the look alone, Ewan knew what the doctor was about to say. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. Your friend didn't make it. He had lost too much blood by the time they got to the hospital. Ewan knew though. I mean, he is a medical student. You're not supposed to take the object out of a stab wound, but despite all their bravado, this just goes to show that they were indeed just still a bunch of teenage boys, and teenage boys are very prone to making stupid decisions. Masiri was crying, Wayne collapsed into Toyo's arms, and Ewan was still in shock with Willem still on his lap. All the annoyance that he felt earlier in the day instantly turns into guilt, asking himself what he could have done better. The nurses don't even let them keep Willem's body in the hospital because they do not take VIDs, brought in dead. She tells them to clean up and go to Central Hospital that they might accept their friend there. As they get there, that's when it dawned on them that their flats had been attacked in what was clearly a cult-related matter and somebody had died. How would they explain this to the school? How would they explain this to their parents? Surprisingly though, none of them were under arrest. The policeman only needed someone to follow him to give a statement about the victim of armed robbery. So Mesiri and Waimi go with him. They unanimously reach a consensus of what their official story would be. Some people had come to their flat, people that Willem already knew because he opened the door for them. They stabbed him and they ran away. No, they do not know if Willem was in a cult, and no, they aren't involved in any cult activities themselves. Toyo tells Ewan that he knows a guy, Nesta, a friend that went to FGC Wari and was Willem and Ewan senior. He was the sergeant major of the Youth Defense Cadets and can get a direct line to the Dean of Student Affairs for them. As Toyo and Ewan walk through the hospital corridor, Ewan asks what will happen when the AK boys find out about Willie's death. Toyo tells him that there's only 3 things that they should be worried about right now. 1, that the school and police might conclude that they are cultists and expel them. 2, the AK boys might think that they betrayed Willem and got him killed. Or 3, the Cosa Nostra might think that they saw one of their faces and come back for revenge. The only thing they can do now is go see Nesta and hope for the best. They meet with him and ask for his help, and he tells them that he'll see what he can do. They recount their story that they all decided on to the dean before heading to Osaze, deciding to sleep in his flat. He had just returned from Uncle Max's, Uncle Max didn't even let Edosa come back into the estate, fearing for his son's life. Osaze prepares hot water for Ewain and prepares to burn his clothes to remove the memory of this night. That night, Ewain had a dream that he was the doctor that attended to Willem, checking his vitals and telling the other him who was holding Willem that he's so sorry for his friend's passing. And then Willem somehow jumps out of his lap, declaring that he feels perfectly fine and they didn't do anything wrong in pulling out the dagger from his back. I mean, look at him, he's fine. His body looked transparent and there was a soft glow where he was stabbed. He tells Ewain thank you for saving him before Osaze opens up the curtain, waking Ewain up from his dream. Now, in the final chapter of the book, chapter 30, after Osaze and Toyo wake Ewain up, they tell him they have to go back to the flats to make sure Mesiri and Waini were okay. On their way back, Osaze tells them how he found out about Willem. It wasn't Prepper actually that told him, but Harry, who he ran into last night. You see, they had a repeat of Phoebe's party in Adolor this time, but Harry left early saying that he didn't like the crowd. And he told Osaze that as he was walking down FGGC Road that night, he saw a group gathered by their flats and he was very sure that the guys who killed Willem left that party that same night and walked that same path to their house. Harry told Osaze that he was traveling to Port Harcourt and that was when Osaze decided to go to Uncle Max's. You see, Harry felt like the Black Axe would connect the dots to him and so he was going to go to Port Harcourt because honestly his father did not send him to university to die. Osaze asked who will tell Willem's family, but anyone could not give an answer to that question. They reached the flats and they were met with policemen who were questioning Mesiri and Waini in the parlor and had conducted a full search of the flats. Now, they weren't under arrest, but they had to follow them to the police headquarters because this wasn't just a simple robbery, it was a murder and it would be investigated by the CID. They identified Willem's body at the morgue and the police took their statements, going easy on the boys as Ewain's uncle called in for them. However, once the IPO found out who Waini's uncle was, they decided to keep her in the station for further questioning, aka further corruption and extortion. She was placed under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder because they think that she had a lover in a different uni and was actually the one that ordered the hit on Willem. Waini told them not to worry, that her family would take care of everything, and the officer assured that she would be out in a few days. The boys go to the gates, Mesiri even joining in on their smoking, and just thought about the fact that they had actually lost a friend to cultism. Waimi was in police custody not for a few days, but 2 weeks before she was finally let free after her family had to take out a full page in the newspaper crying for her release. But a lot had happened in those 2 weeks. Willem's dad had come to the flat to collect his son's stuff his mom couldn't bear to. His dad paused at the place that his son's body fell, silent and withdrawn with tears in his eyes as he shook the boy's hands and left. The Monday after Willem's death, 2 AK boys walked into the law department and shot Laurenchi point blank, and he died in Brenda's arms. The assailants were chased by a crowd of students who beat them up and dropped them at the station in the cell right next to Waimi. The act broke Brenda, and she ultimately decided that she couldn't continue at Uniben, instead transferring to the UK to continue her education there. Owen didn't even get a chance to see her before she left. Tambo, contrary to popular belief, had not run to Port Harcourt yet. He had snuck into the flat to get the rest of his things because he was a marked man. The Cosa Nostra had abandoned him, and Tommy had called him a fool for being friends with an AK boy in the first place. Odegwa had warned Tambo that almost all the AK boys thought that he killed Willem, and apparently Jibril, who was the cause of all this chaos in the first place, had traveled out of Benin the morning after Willie's death because of course nothing ever happens to the bad people. Amide was Ewain's rock during this period, holding him when he finally broke down a week after Willie's death and even moved into the flat and was the one to wash off all the blood stains that were left in the kitchen. Ewain's parents had come to Benin 2 days after Willie's death, and his father had finally had enough and told him that he and his brother would be continuing their education in the UK in September, with NEA joining them later. But that didn't stop him from still reading for his MBs, which were a month away. Surprisingly, even though 2 students had died, the school didn't close down and everything still went on as normal. AFCON that year was held in South Africa, and the general of the country, insulted by Nelson Mandela, pulled the Super Eagles out of the tournament. The day that Waimi came back, she had lost weight and was still wearing the same jeans from 2 weeks ago. Everyone gathered around her in the parlor. Toyo, Mesiri, Amide, and Ewain. But they also felt the presence of everyone who wasn't there. Odegwa, Tambo, Kayode, Harry, Chunky, Monkey, Brenda, they all listened as she told them the SSS director had held her in an investigation room for a long time, berating her and her family and how they felt they were above power. But as soon as she saw spits fly out of his mouth and him lick his lips, she just knew that she was free, just like that. Because what is more powerful than corruption in a country like Nigeria? And that, my friends, was the full story of Fine Boys. But wait, we are not done yet because we have to get to the rule scale. Now, what is the rule scale, you might ask? The rule scale is a scale made by yours truly to systematically rate the books that we cover on the channel. I rate books based on readability, entertainment/enjoyment, writing style, and lessons learned. So let's get into it. For readability, I would give this book an 8 out of 10, only because it's a bit complicated if you don't know Benin that well, if you don't know the places. I kind of like, it was quite complicating for me because I never been to University of Benin. I didn't know like certain very important details about the place that they were in the book. But other than that, great writing that really pulls you in and is also very easy to follow on a surface level. Entertainment/enjoyment, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. I cried, I laughed, I cringed. It was so entertaining. It was so enjoyable. Even though I'm really sad that Willie died, but I feel like he had to die to prove a point that at the end of the day, as much as, they kept thinking that they were men and, they had everything under control, at the end of the day, they're still stupid teenage boys. They make stupid teenage boy decisions. It was entertaining. It was enjoyable, but it was also quite sad. It's a very sad thing. I did cry when I got to William's death. And honestly, I didn't even because obviously this is just a review channel. I'm not going to talk about every single detail in the book, but then if you read the book and you actually read the whole part with William's death, it is really, really sad. Writing style, I would give a 9 out of 10. Again, because it's just a bit confusing to newer readers, I would say, but Eghose is an immersive storyteller and he really pulls you into his characters' worlds and he forces you to walk in their shoes. And any writer that can do that is an amazing writer, in my opinion, because it's so hard to get people to care about your story unless you reel them in, and he's really good at reeling you in. I think by the time you get to chapter 15, like halfway through the book, you feel like you have to know what's going to happen. You can't just drop the book and say that, oh well, I don't really like it. I don't really want to know what happens at the end. Trust me, you will want to know what happens at the end of this book. It's so well written. So well written. And finally, lessons learned. What is the main lesson that we can get out of this book? Obviously, the lesson is right in our faces. Please, please, and please. Cultism was a very serious issue in the 90s, and it's not as prevalent in these times. It's not as prevalent now. It doesn't really happen in universities. Although it might, we just don't know. It might be, under wraps. But please, this is a PSA. If you are a young person that is entering university and somehow you found this video, please know that you do not have to ruin your life or end your life early because you want to fit in or seem cool with a certain group of people in university. Nobody cares about the cool kids in university. There is nothing like the cool kids in university. If you are part of a group that is the cool kids in university, you're actually not cool, because the whole point of university is to not care about other people. Like this is a you thing. This is your life. This is your education. I promise you, those people that are telling you to blend into course, they don't care about you. If they did, they wouldn't be putting you in those dangerous situations. And another serious lesson to learn. Please, when somebody is stabbed, do not take the object they were stabbed with out of their body, because it is acting like a plug. It's keeping all the blood inside. So if you take it out, the blood is going to come out and they're going to bleed to death. Okay? I feel like Ewan should have listened to his mom. William also should have probably listened to Ewan's mom, because maybe his life could have been saved. But ultimately, I feel like the main lesson of this book is don't throw away a lifetime for a good time. I would give this a 9 out of 10, only because you made me cry. Other than that, this was an amazing book, and that brings our total score to 36 out of 40, a 90%, which is an A++ in my books. So yeah, thank you so much if you've been here since part 1. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. And I really hope you read this book. Again, these videos are for you to get introduced to the book and for people who don't mind spoilers to know what happens in the book. But that shouldn't deter you from reading the book just because you already know what's going to happen. Thank you so much for watching.